feet. She said it was 11,000 square feet. Before I can bring in the others, just on the idea of how this proceeds, Donald Trump can delay. In terms of a civil suit like this, does it matter? In a criminal trial, you have every right, every American citizen, whether you're rich or poor, has the right to vote your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. She made the point of noting that Donald Trump repeatedly took the Fifth in his deposition as part of her investigation. Is that a different context in a civil setting?
You still have the right to invoke it. The difference in the civil setting is when you invoke it, they can be fact finder, judge, jury can draw an adverse inference against you. So it's kind of interesting the timing of who invoked it when. Early on, people didn't invoke it a lot, and then I believe two of the children, including Carrington, did not invoke it. But the main difference is you can draw an adverse inference in civil actions, but in criminal cases, you can't do that.
And if you listen to her then, Bash, if you listen to Attorney General Letitia James, it's the Trump family. But she was describing an organization that sounds like an organized crime family. She says that he directed all of this, that he met with Mr. Westerberg every year to sign off and to look at and review the financial statements, but that his children, 2 sons and a daughter, were all part of it.
No question about it. And you and Maggie were just talking about that all of this goes to the heart of who he is, even more so political history. Having said that, the way that that Letitia James described the alleged misconduct is very much in keeping with and intended to, I think, break the spell of who his supporters believe he is. She said that this is proof that there shouldn't be 2 kinds of justice. There shouldn't be 2 kinds of America, basically, one for the elite and one for everyday Americans, that he was trying to the word she used for scheme and conspiracy, build those things in order to get away with things like the elite do. His whole political campaign, his whole presidency, and we expect likely 2024 will be on for the little guy. And they look at him as somebody who sort of plays in the elite pond, but actually is more for the worker. The language that she used to describe this 250-page legal document was clearly intended to disrupt that. I mean, unclear if she can, but it was very noteworthy how she decided to explain it.
Right, and you covered Trump for a long time, Jeremy. You should jump in. I just want to go back to this as a statement from Alina Haddle, one of Trump's attorneys, and his son, Donald Trump Jr., is echoing these same points on Twitter. Today's filing is neither focused on the facts nor the law, rather solely focused on advancing Attorney General's political agenda. This is a familiar playbook from the Trump organization, saying it's all political, it's all Democrats out to get him, not addressing the facts.
Yeah, I mean, it was to be expected, right? And I think Dennis' point is spot on, because when I think back to Trump in 2016 and in 2020 as well, he would actually point out that he knew that people like him who were wealthy played by a different set of rules. And he promised to change some of those things. Of course, during his presidency, he actually did nothing to actually try and address differences in taxes, for example, some of the loopholes that he vowed to close that he never actually acted on. And here it's just kind of revealing that Donald Trump not only knew about this separate set of rules, but that he also played by that separate set of rules. And that is ultimately the story of Donald Trump's rise in business and in politics, is constantly playing by a different set of rules. We are seeing here 10 years of inflation and false statements of the valuations of these properties, but it is only now that Trump is finally perhaps getting investigated. Perhaps there's going to be a measure of justice for playing by a different set of rules. And when you look at the number of investigations that Trump faces, all of them go to this very same idea that Donald Trump, for years, has thought that he was above the law, and perhaps he is finally facing some kind of.
And one of the things, if you read through this, there's just a lot of detailed inside information about the business and the numbers used by the Trump organization, stuff he has tried to keep out of the public domain for quite some time. Evan Perez is still with us. And Evan, the Attorney General was mindful there. That's why this complaint is so long and so detailed of what was likely to come from the Trump family. She also has to deal with the simple fact that she has publicly, as a politician, she's a prosecutor, but she's also a politician, and she has publicly criticized Donald Trump many, many times that do give him an opening to say there's politics at play here.
Right, it really does. And I think you heard one question during the press conference, John, where someone asked the question, Trump doesn't do this on his own, right? He's got accountants, he's got lenders, he's got insurers, he's got tax authorities, all of whom had oversight over this. And why is it that he was getting away with this for this long? What changed? And the question for Letitia James and others are going to have to answer to judges, perhaps, is whether there is something that has made a difference, and whether the political part of this is why they're certainly cracking down on Donald Trump and treating him perhaps differently from other people in New York who might be doing the same thing.
It is remarkable, Mitchell, that we're having this conversation. Donald Trump is still the most powerful figure in the Republican Party. Donald Trump is planning to run for president again in the next election cycle. We are 48 days away from a midterm election. You're the state you cover most. Georgia is critical to that election calculation, and in that state is one of the other. That's a criminal investigation of Donald Trump for his efforts to interfere and overturn the 2020 election. It's just everywhere you look. There's legal trouble for Donald Trump.
Right, and it's interesting that we knew all along that the state investigators, state and local investigators in New York and Georgia were kind of like, if Trump was going to face charges, it would likely come out of one of these state or local investigations. But to the point, politically, it may not hurt him at all. It's likely not with his base, because they'll believe, number one, they'll believe his rebuttals, and they'll believe it's been politicized, and they believe that he is kind of this person who's learned how to play in the elite pond to his own benefit, and in some ways that's part of his appeal to a lot of his base.
Let's bring Kara Scannell back into the conversation. Kara was there at the announcement and has been going through these documents. It's incredibly detailed, Kara, laid out in the filing here. The Attorney General says she promises she will prove this case in court.
Yeah, John, she supplies more than 200 examples where she says that the valuations of various properties was inflated. You go through it and it's just a list of almost every property that the Trump organization owns or controls. One of the examples that Evan had mentioned with Mar-a-Lago, where according to the Attorney General's office, that should have been valued around $75 million. But instead, they say that the Trump organization valued it almost 10 times that at $739 million, disregarding what she said Trump knew, because he had signed deeds that explained that there were restrictions on development, but instead, Letitia James's office is alleging that Trump nonetheless inflated those valuations. And they also look at some of these other properties where, she says from 1 year it was valued, around $200 million, and then it jumps up the next year. She also said in this lawsuit that there were some properties that in the same year were valued based on different strategies, different metrics. So they weren't even following a consistent pattern to value properties, all of which goes to what she says was an effort to just boost the numbers, to inflate the valuations. And that in turn helped the Trump organization and the former president personally, she alleges, by inflating his net worth, giving him better interest rates, giving him better tax breaks. It's all part of what she said was a scheme that really was expansive and seemed to allegedly cover the breadth of the Trump organization.
It's a fascinating case. We watch it go forward. And Counselor, back to you, Shan Wu, and the idea of, just to help viewers understand, we often focus on criminal trials. We know there are federal grand juries looking into January 6th, for example, a federal investigation of the classified documents taken to Mar-a-Lago. But in terms of when you go after a business, take the Trump name out of it, you go after a business in a civil filing, essentially alleging bank fraud, insurance fraud, tax fraud, cheating, lying, stealing. How does this play out?
Well, when you're going after a business this way, you're really going after the root of how they make money. And that's what this is geared towards, is trying to take apart how they've made money and to stop them from making it the wrong way. As Dan alluded to, that very compelling phrase, the tale of two justice systems, that's what this is trying to take apart. And I think one of the bigger questions is the question of how did he and others perhaps like him get away with that? That's the real two justice systems, is that these big banks, accounting firms, they look the other way, and that's a question I hope will be answered too.
They look the other way because they can make money too.
Right.
They can make money. And in terms of using the civil process to try to essentially handcuff Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, and Ivanka Trump in their ability, Mr. Weisselberg as well, and the other financial officer, to essentially handcuff them from being able to have major corporate roles, the impact on that of your future, if you will, career?
Yeah, enormous. I mean, the business can go to another place, but folks like Weissenberg, this has been his living, and it stops him from doing that in the future. And the advantage of the civil process, lower standard of proof.
We'll watch that process play out. Appreciate the conversation here. Next, the other big story of the day, the President of the United States with a direct response to the Russian President Vladimir Putin. This after Moscow says it will send more troops to Ukraine's front lines.
Well, would you look at that?
Jerry, you gotta see this.
Saying it. Trust me, after 15 walks, that's a little old.
Yeah.
I really should be retired by now. Wish I invested when I had the chance. To the moon. Unbelievable.
Stop waiting. Start investing. E-Trade from Morgan Stanley.
Better skin from your body wash? Try Olay Body Wash with skincare super ingredient, collagen. Olay Body Wash with collagen hydrates to rejuvenate skin surface cells for healthier looking skin in just 14 days. From dry and dull to firm and radiant. So I can step into my day feeling my best in my skin. And now, try Olay Body Lotion, which hydrates for visibly firmer skin that improves over time. Olay Body, fearless in my skin.
Hey babe, meet us at the bottom of the trail. Oh man. Hey.
Open up. The redesigned Chevy Silverado with a sophisticated high-tech interior.
Open the door.
It's easy to forget it's a truck.
Thanks.
Nice truck. What? Find new style. Find new roads. Chevrolet.
I'm on a mission to talk to people about getting screened for colon cancer and hear their reasons why.
I screened for my son. I'm his biggest fan.
If you're 45 or older at average risk, you have screening options, like Cologuard.
Cologuard is non-invasive and finds 92% of colon cancers. It's not for those at high risk. False positive and negative results may occur. Ask your provider if Cologuard is right for you.
Everyone has a reason to screen for colon cancer. If you're 45 or older, get started at missiontoscreen.com.
Who's on it with Jardiance?
We're managing type 2 diabetes and heart risk.
We're hitting the trails between meetings.
And putting the brakes on fried foods.
Jardiance is a once daily pill that not only lowers A1C, it goes beyond to reduce the risk of cardiovascular death for adults with type 2 diabetes and known heart disease. And Jardiance may help you lose some weight.
Jardiance may cause serious side effects, including ketoacidosis that may be fatal, dehydration that can lead to sudden worsening of kidney function, and genital yeast or urinary tract infections. A rare life-threatening bacterial infection in the skin of the perineum could occur. Stop taking Jardiance and call your doctor right away if you have symptoms of this infection, ketoacidosis, or an allergic reaction. And don't take it if you're on dialysis. Taking Jardiance with a sulfonylurea or insulin may cause low blood sugar.
A once daily pill that goes beyond lowering A1C.
We're on it.
We're on it.
We're on it with Jardiance.
Ask your doctor about Jardiance.
For people living with HIV, keep being you and ask your doctor about Biktarvy. Biktarvy is a complete one-pill, once-a-day treatment used for HIV in certain adults. It's not a cure, but with one small pill, Biktarvy fights HIV to help you get to and stay undetectable. That's when the amount of virus is so low, it cannot be measured by a lab test. Research shows people who take HIV treatment every day and get to and stay undetectable can no longer transmit HIV through sex.
Serious side effects can occur, including kidney problems and kidney failure. Rare, life-threatening side effects include a buildup of lactic acid and liver problems. Do not take Biktarvy if you take dofetilide or Rafamine. Tell your doctor about all the medicines and supplements you take if you are pregnant or breastfeeding, or if you have kidney or liver problems, including hepatitis. If you have hepatitis B, do not stop taking Biktarvy without talking to your doctor. Common side effects were diarrhea, nausea, and headache.
If you're living with HIV, keep loving who you are and ask your doctor if Biktarvy is right for you.
Dramatic day on the global stage, headlined by speeches by both the President of the United States and the President of Russia. President Biden today addressing the United Nations General Assembly. That a few hours after Vladimir Putin delivered a provocative speech about the future of the war in Ukraine. President Biden saying the U.S. will not shrink from this new Russian provocation. Vladimir Putin's decision to call out more troops to the front lines.
This world should see these outrageous acts for what they are. Putin claims he had to act because Russia was threatened. But no one threatened Russia. And no one other than Russia sought conflict. This war is about extinguishing Ukraine's right to exist as a state, plain and simple. And Ukraine's right to exist as a people. Whoever you are, wherever you live, whatever you believe, that should make your blood run cold.
CNN is covering this critical speech, critical moment from New York and around the globe. CNN diplomatically is at the White House. Kylie Atwood is inside the United Nations, outside the United Nations. Matthew Chance standing by for us in London. Phil, let's begin at the White House. The president is in a stare down with Vladimir Putin. For 7 months, he has kept the coalition together. What was the main White House objective today, especially after Putin began the day with that provocative speech?
Yeah, John, I think these were remarks that were as explicit as they were unsparing. They were obviously a direct condemnation, not just of Russia's actions, but also of President Vladimir Putin directly. But I also think it gives a window into what White House officials are seeing and thinking at this moment. They obviously watched with great interest President Putin's taped speech earlier. They recognize this very clear escalation, though they see it as a moment of weakness, not just in terms of how Russia is operating, but as it pertains to the entire world, the international order right now. If you take a close listen to the speech that President Biden laid out today, it was a message not just to the alliance that has come to Ukraine's aid over the course of the last 7 months. It was a very clear message to the entire international order, the other 191 members beyond Russia in the United States of the United Nations. They sense a moment of weakness, not just in Russia, but in perhaps some of Russia's closest allies, and they want to try and make that point and perhaps bring them over, or at least bring them away from Russia at this moment of weakness for President Putin.
And so Matthew Chance, come into the conversation at that point. You have extensive experience covering Mr. Putin. In his speech today, he said he was having a mobilization to send thousands, tens of thousands of more troops to the front lines. And listen to this part where he essentially said, if you violate Russia's sovereignty, if you defy me, I do not take any options off the table. Listen.
This is not a bluff. The citizens of Russia can be sure that the territorial integrity of our homeland, our independence, and freedom will be ensured. And those who try to blackmail us with nuclear weapons should know that the prevailing winds can turn in their direction.
The United States would argue there's nobody blackmailing him with nuclear weapons, that he is the one. But Matthew, given your experience, what was your biggest takeaway from Putin here? Defiant, saying he will achieve his goals in Ukraine, but saying that after several weeks now of losses on the battlefield.
Yeah, and it's because of those losses that it's been forced into taking this action. It's interesting that nuclear threat, you get a lot of that out of Russia. It's amplified on the state media, and it's usually dismissed by serious military observers because the consequences for Russia would be enormous as well if it carried them out. That's not often sort of set out by Vladimir Putin. But why it's important now is that it's set against the backdrop of a number of referendums that have been announced in the areas that Russia occupies inside Ukraine. They're undoubtedly going to be voting to join the Russian Federation. Russia will then consider those areas to be part of the motherland, part of Mother Russia. And it's what Putin is doing then is underlying that any attack on any part of Russia could potentially be met with nuclear weapons. And so his gamble is that that's going to change the calculus of Ukraine and its Western backers. It's not clear that it will, but it's also not altogether clear that Putin is bluffing because he is an unpredictable character.
He is indeed. And Kylie Atwood, Matthew talks about the gamble. The challenge for the President of the United States is to keep together the global coalition that he has managed quite effectively for the past 7 months. The question is, if you consider the long-term Russian view, Vladimir Putin thinks, yes, perhaps the world has stayed resolved for now. He is hoping the world essentially loses patience, loses the financial commitment to Ukraine here. In your conversations at the United Nations, how tight, how resolved is the broader coalition?
Well, the coalition does seem pretty tight right now. You heard from President Biden talking about all of the countries that have come on side of the United States to support Ukraine. And when it comes to his comments surrounding the nuclear threat and the nuclear buildup of countries, I do think it's significant that he called out Russia specifically for their concerning remarks, President Putin's, in his word, irresponsible threats when it comes to nuclear threats. But he also spoke to the concerns about China and their buildup of nuclear weapons that he said is happening in a fashion that is not transparent. And when it comes to Iran, he said the United States is committed to making sure they don't acquire a nuclear weapon, and he doubled down on diplomacy with Iran, but of course we've seen that stalled in recent weeks.
In recent weeks, a fascinating day. Callie Abbott, Matthew Chancellor, man, I appreciate the important reporting. Up next for us, the midterm message war. Republicans try to steer the conversation to inflation and immigration. One of their own, though, complicates things by focusing on abortion.
Key Food in our family of supermarkets has everything that you need for your next meal. Our private brand, Urban Meadow, offers a wide variety of products with regular and organic options for health-conscious customers. Our products are versatile and can be found across every aisle in our stores. To learn more, visit keyfood.com or look for Urban Meadow at your local store in the Key Food family of supermarkets.
Después del accidente y preguntarme, ¿estoy muriendo? ¿Qué va a pasar por mis hijos? Después que el cirujano predijera una recuperación larga, y la idea aterradora que mi trabajo y sustento se habían acabado, nunca pensé que me podía suceder a mí.
Peña y Camp ha defendido exitosamente los derechos de miles de víctimas de accidentes. Llámenos al 1888 Peña Ayuda o visite peñacamp.com.
They say a good home healthcare worker is like family.
At Premier, we're inviting new employees to join our family with a package worth over $20 an hour.
That can include wages, benefits, pension, and training.
At Premier, we offer flexible hours. That lets me keep an eye on this one.
So if you're ready to do important work and be valued for it,
join the Premier family. Call 866-61-PREMIER.
Virtual reality to end chronic pain.
It really helps me a lot.
A promising new therapy.
The more you're enjoying the environment, the more you're going to benefit from it.
CBS 2 with how it's helping patients feel better. Tonight at 11.
At CBS News New York, we don't see from here.
We see from here.
Up close and inside some of the busiest communities on Earth. Streaming the news that matters to you.
No. No.
You want him?
Ooh, I like him.
Quick, the quicker picker-upper. Bounty picks up messes quicker, and each sheet is 2 times more absorbent, so you can use less.
He's an 8.
He's a 9.
Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.
Some days your body is a temple. Some days the temple wants sugar. You might relieve stress naturally on Monday and plan for it on Tuesday. Because being human isn't always so fries or salad. Sometimes it's both. So relax with essential oils or a glass of cat. Fall asleep with melatonin and wake up to caffeine. Because whether you want traditional medicine or alternative remedies, there's no wrong way to treat life at Rite Aid.
I invest in Invesco QQQ, a fund that gives me access to NASDAQ 100 innovations like CGI. Oh, don't worry.
Become an agent of innovation with Invesco QQQ. For investing, carefully read and consider fund investment objectives, risk, charges, and expenses and more. Prospectus at invesco.com.
I'm on a mission to talk to people about getting screened for colon cancer and hear their reasons why.
I screened for my son. I'm his biggest fan.
If you're 45 or older at average risk, you have screening options, like Cologuard.
Cologuard is non-invasive and finds 92% of colon cancers. It's not for those at high risk. False positive and negative results may occur. Ask your provider if Cologuard is right for you.
Everyone has a reason to screen for colon cancer. If you're 45 or older, get started at missiontoscreen.com.
Florida's Republican governor now faces a class action lawsuit over his decision to fly migrants to Martha's Vineyard. That lawsuit alleges those migrants were targeted, manipulated, and it alleges made false promises, including being told to sign a document they didn't understand in exchange for a $10 McDonald's gift card. Governor Ron DeSantis says everything was done above board, and the transportation, he says, was voluntary. Now, inside 50 days to the midterm vote, Governor DeSantis getting some high-profile support.
There's nothing compassionate or humane about the border crisis that Democrats' mixed signals and failed policies have unleashed. So these well-to-do blue enclaves are finally witnessing the smallest fraction of the challenges that open borders have forced on working-class communities all across our country.
So are Republicans right to see this as a winning issue? Let's get some insights from Hillary Rosen, Democratic strategist, and Republican Scott Jennings, the former McConnell campaign advisor. Hillary, let me start with you. Mitch McConnell is a very disciplined man, as you know. If he's talking about this, using his time to talk about this, he thinks it can help him. If a Democrat in a competitive statewide race called you up and says, how do I deal with this issue? Your answer is what?
I think you just have to point out how ridiculously cruel it is to use human beings as political pawns, and I don't think the country's for that. You know, a candidate, a Democratic candidate can say, look, the federal government has an obligation to help states that are spending money for people illegally crossing, and we ought to do that. But we ought not treat these people like animals and cart them around the country without their consent. It's just not right, and I don't think people are for that at all.
Scott Jennings, to that point, I just want to show you ad spending over the last month. Republicans are spending a lot more than Democrats on immigration, but it is dwarfed by what Democrats are spending on the abortion issue. Democrats believe the Dobbs decision helps them in the suburbs with moderate Republicans, with independents. Republicans are clearly trying to turn the conversation back to immigration and to crime to target those same voters. Walk through that tug-of-war if you're inside a campaign war room.
Yeah, two different conversations going on with two different kinds of voters. Republicans want to run this thing on inflation, immigration, crime. Democrats want to run it on Trump and abortion and maybe climate change and gun violence. Really two different conversations. And in the NBC News poll that came out on Sunday, there was a question. It was, what's more important to you? Your candidate's view on cost of living or a candidate's view on abortion? Cost of living won, 59 to 37% in that survey. This was among registered voters. So I think if Republicans can stay disciplined on cost of living and immigration, it is a winning issue for them. Although I would just point out these Senate races are taking place in very purple states, and the races are incredibly close.
All right, you mentioned the word discipline there, so that's my gateway to bring Lindsey Graham. That's my gateway to bring Lindsey Graham into the conversation. The Dobbs decision, essentially the Supreme Court, like it or don't like it, the Supreme Court said abortion is now up to the states. Lindsey Graham says it shouldn't be. Listen.
I ain't going to advocate a national minimum standard.
Mitch McConnell doesn't want you to do
well, you know, but the pro-life community wants me to do it, and I'm going to do it. Let me tell you why I think Mitch is wrong. People need to know who you are and where you are. So what would I do if I were running? I've won 4 times. I would look the camera in the eye and say that my opponent supports aborting a baby up to the moment of birth with taxpayer dollars.
In many races, Hillary, is that not a gift to Democrats? Lindsey Graham saying, I want a national ban?
Look, it is a gift to Democrats, but it's just an awful situation. I mean, this country does not want to see doctors put in jail when women have to have, you know, critical and health decisions. They do not want this to be as harsh a law as the Supreme Court is making it, and Republicans are responsible for that. I do think that what we're seeing, you know, is, look, this is a fairly divided country, but we are not divided actually on this issue, and that's why you're going to see